Alright guys, so a few days ago on November the 16th, the Dawnless Days mod team had a massive campaign Q&A, and this was basically loads and loads of questions, I think about 250 questions in total, simply about the campaign, how development is going, whether this faction is going to be playable, how this mechanic is going to work, etc., how the development is actually going, at what stage it's at. Like, there are loads of fantastic questions here, and what I did basically, because it would take a long time to go through this Discord channel, just to go through all the questions that were asked. The answers are all kind of very sporadic and it's not very structured, right? So what I did was I put a document together and I picked the about 70, I think, or 80 questions that I thought were the most important, that I think a lot of people will be more informed about, that are really great questions with some really interesting answers as well. And there are lots of little sneak peek images, screenshots of the campaign that have been shared in this Q&A as well. So starting from the top, guys, let's dive straight in. Is Gundabad going to be a faction? Yes, absolutely. Is there going to be more factions upon full release? Yes, the full release is planned to include Eriador and factions in that area, Rangers, Arnor. The exact list of minor unplayable factions is still not finalized and will most likely be designed after the first public campaign comes out. So just keep that in mind about kind of campaign and playable factions questions here. Lots more iterations will come out in the future after the first public release. Will Minas Tirith have multiple stage sieges like DEI has for Rome and the Capitoline Hill? No is the answer to that. Will the Easterling clans units that are not yet made have placeholders for version 1 and be usable? Just FYI, this is a campaign Q&A, so this is the only kind of unit question and answer that I've included here. Really, the rest of the questions are really going to be focused on the campaign side of things. We are pushing to have them all completed, but if not, there will be placeholders essentially for the Easterling clan units. How will the fellowship mechanic work? There's no fellowship mechanic, guys. That won't be included here. It's not like DAC. It's not something I think Attila is really kind of there to be able to implement properly, so they're not going to be doing that. Could you give us more regular updates on what you've done and what's left to do so we can get a better picture on progress? Great question here. We will. It depends on my availability. I think it's Elegy or Victimized who's talking here. It depends on my availability, mainly in the fact that we lack people to properly record videos and such in the quality we want them to. We also want to release a trailer first. There was also another question further down the line I didn't include here about whether a roadmap would be possible. And basically the team are open to both of these things. They'd like to make a trailer. They're open to making a roadmap. There is a Trello board, by the way. You can always look at the Trello for what's being worked on, what's been completed, etc., what's in the future. So that's available to see as well. Is there a Valar host invasion script? No. Is Azog going to be the faction leader of Gundabad? No. In their timeline, he's dead. Will there be a naval combat upon full release, along with some more heavy units, such as boars for the dwarves? Naval units and combat is expected to be present on full release, and even, guys, some naval units and warfare will be included in version 1, the first public release. So keep that in mind. Naval combat for Dawnless Days, but they won't have boars for the dwarves. Oh god, that was difficult to say. They won't have boars for the dwarves. There you go. Will the One Ring offer bonuses to all factions or just Mordor, depending on who possesses it? Great question here. This hasn't been implemented yet, but we have ideas. The One Ring will be possible to attain as part of an event chain for Mordor. So this is kind of an event chain. It's not quite, I mean, it is scripted essentially, but it's not something that's going to be quite open to other factions as well. It's not yet decided if other factions will be able to interact with it, but they may kind of do that for the future in future iterations of mechanics further down the line. Will there be a script to rebuild Osgiliath and cleanse Minas Ithil? It's just an upgrade to a building. It doesn't require scripts just yet, but essentially, yes. So just keep that in mind as well. Will there be a cinematic or perhaps an in-game trailer upon release? We've just covered that. Yes. Will the Dunedain Rangers be added as a faction and maybe an option to rebuild Arnor? That's the plan. So Dunedain Rangers will be included. They will probably be a Horde faction, although later on Victimized, I think, does say that Horde factions generally is something that they're not quite interested in implementing for Dawnless Days. They don't work very well with the campaign in terms of balancing, I believe, but at least the Rangers might be a Horde faction, underlining might there. Is Angmar going to be in the campaign? No. Has campaign AI been reworked? To some extent. We've made minor changes to decision-making priorities, but it's still an ongoing work in progress. The end result will depend on feedback from our testers. AI is really difficult, guys. guys. It all kind of depends on balancing how the AI interacts with building buildings, recruiting armies, etc. You really want to have those priorities for each AI faction kind of down, so they're interacting with each other, taking over land the way you want them to. Things kind of progress naturally how you'd like them to. So this is an area that's definitely going to be changing a lot. Campaign AI. Is the differences between Attila Engine and Warhammer significant or not? Is it possible to transfer at least some of the progress to new Total War? So for Warhammer specifically, guys, whilst I have no clue about the campaign side, all units would have to be reworked as a different shader is used in Warhammer. But of course, there are other games that could be moved into, like they've said previously, they want to maybe move it into Thrones of Britannia. There would be other pieces of work that would be involved in order to do that, changes to UI, certain mechanics, etc. So it can definitely be moved to certain other games, maybe in the future if they decide to do that. Playing as Gondor, are you going to have scripted invasions from Harad and Mordor, or will it be mainly sandbox-like? It's going to be sandbox. There won't be any need for scripted invasions. They're kind of balancing it around what I just said, the priorities of faction AI, essentially. And then moving on to a bit more of a scripted question. How scripted is the campaign going to be? AKA, how many scripts will there be for factions? So this is kind of like each faction essentially will have 2-3 unique mechanics for each one, right? And each of these mechanics may have some support from scripts. The reason they want the base game to be good on its own, and they want it to be compatible with MP multiplayer as much as possible as well. So just keep that in mind as well. The mod team are really prioritizing people to be able to play in multiplayer, which is really quite a cool prospect. I'm very excited to try that out. Are you guys going to be adding Umbar as a faction? They are planned and implemented as an unplayable Southron faction at the moment. I'm sure there will be sub-mods later down the line, unlocking loads of other factions to play as well, but officially in the kind of main release, they will be an unplayable faction. Will there be consequences for having named generals die? Yes, they will be dead. I think this was an answer by Elegy, kind of a comical answer, but actually Victimize does later on go into saying you know, immortal characters, immortal generals can die and maybe come back. So things like Nazgul, riders, you know, etc. Lots of really cool, interesting characters, Gandalf maybe, that are technically immortal should be able to come back as well. So a bit more kind of going into that later on. Will Sauron physically exist as a character you can use prior to getting the One Ring, similarly to the books, or will it be restricted by a script? So you won't be able to get Sauron until you get the One Ring. Will it be possible to conquer Rivendell? Yes. Is there an option to recruit Balrogs or Shelob spiders? At the moment, no. You know, the answer is no, but I imagine, you know, further down the line, they may look into creating custom assets, you know, units for Balrog or Shelob. You know, there are plenty of interesting avenues for expansion unit-wise that they haven't touched yet. So, you know, you never know, but the answer at the moment is no. Will you add some units when you retake Khazad-dûm as Erebor? Will Mordor have trolls operate large onagers? Will Erebor have war goats? Those kinds of questions, more unit questions here, but yeah, there's an answer to this one. So once you conquer Khazad-dûm as Erebor, you will be able to recruit Mansion Reclaimers. This is something that's gone into a little bit further in the Q&A as well. Certain settlements and regions will have a type of area of recruitment system. So you conquer that region, you will have access to certain local units, I believe. And this is just an example. Or at least conquering a specific settlement will give that faction that you're playing a specific unit to recruit, is the way I understand it. Erebor won't have goats, will have custom voice lines. Uruk-hai, there won't be any more of those. Khazad-dûm has 3 settlements for now. Will there be a remnant of Arnor or the Dunlendings? Yes, the Dunedain, but not in version 1. Will Khand be playable on the map? Will there be a Men of Nirn? No to both questions. Will they be in Mordor's roster? No, no, no. Will there be cosmetic name changes for certain factions once they conquer enough land? Maybe. They are exploring this option at the moment. So there's lots of, I think, Aragorn, you know, taking over Gondor or uniting, you know, certain lands. There's possibilities there as well. When playing as Mordor and a Nazgul general dies, are they gone for good or do they respawn? Like I said, we might make them respawn via script. So Nazgul generals are a good example of how they might die, but then come back later on, script-wise, respawning in a certain area due to an event or something like that. Will we be able to see the Undying Lands? No. Will the campaign be released in alpha form, or will you guys wait until it is more fully complete? Great question here. We're past the implementation stage, so all the core mechanics, factions, UI, units, etc., battle maps, a lot of these have already been implemented and finished. They're now in the balancing stage, and the next stage after that is going to be polishing. And what they're going to do is open the mod to beta testing. So keep this in mind if you're interested in the future, closer to the end of the balancing stage, beginning of the polishing stage. So that's the plan for open beta testing, guys. Just FYI, if you're wondering, you want to get access, you want to feedback about the kind of polishing that the mod needs, bug fixes, crash issues, kind of balancing and stuff like that as well. This is going to be when you're going to be able to access it, essentially. If Isengard is claimed by Aragorn when he's High King, would it be possible to add a script where he reclaims the Elendilmir? That gives some kind of benefit. It is possible, but currently this particular event is not planned. Lots of other scripts and events are planned and already in place, I believe. So lots of other bits are in place. It's just this one hasn't quite been addressed just yet. In version 1, will there be a true sandbox campaign option as well as a more linear story-oriented campaign? Not at the moment. So there won't be a fully sandbox experience. It's going to be quite a bit more kind of a linear story. There's obviously options to expand and break certain alliances, etc., to change things up a little bit. There's going to be, you know, not fully hard-coded limited, right? But it's not going to be a true sandbox campaign. Will Gandalf, Sauron get any special abilities for battles? Absolutely yes, but no magic. And there's another question further down about this. Since in new Total War games, the provinces are split between main settlement and a couple of smaller ones, I assume that you will use this system. So the answer is yes, they will. Additionally, will there be provinces with only one settlement? And the answer to that is no. So they're going to stick to the current provincial system in Total War as it is for this mod. Will the mod still move to TOB? Like I said before, they did mention they were considering it. They were looking at interest to see if people would like it to be in TOB. Lots of interest, of course, but it's not something they're going to be doing. Apparently, they've moved away from that. You know, their idea of moving the mod to something newer is if there's a newer historical game, something like Medieval 3, essentially, is what they've said. Will Gandalf start out as Gandalf the Grey and turn into Gandalf the White? Great little question here. They do have plans for Gandalf, just nothing fully confirmed just yet. The plan was to make the character available for every good faction, which is quite cool, where he would spawn for a limited number of turns with local names to the faction, such as Gandalf or Mithrandir, something similar to Warhammer 2's Gotrek and Felix mechanic. If you've played that, you know what that's all about. Very cool little idea there. I like the limited number of turns and different names depending on where he's spawning. That's quite cool. Through your development of the mod so far, have you found anything to indicate why Attila has performance issues? That it does? If yes, any solutions? Another cool question. I actually asked this one, I think. Unfortunately, Attila is poorly optimized in comparison to other Total Wars, no matter the user hardware. However, we have found something that might help by increasing the thread amount used by the game in the preferences text file. So this is something that you can do, guys. If you're having issues with Attila, really bad issues, you can go into the Creative Assembly app data script section and increase the amount of threads that the game uses, your CPU threads. Will there be ent or ent scripts? So no, there won't be ents in terms of like you're going to engage with them maybe diplomatically or as a faction, but there will be a script for ents specifically. Maybe they invade Isengard, and if you're playing as Isengard, you have to defend the kind of main city. Damn, I've forgotten the name now. Against the invasion of the Ents, right? Will there be any kind of mercenary system? Yes, we will reuse Attila's mercenary system as special recruitment. In campaign, it will allow you to recruit, for example, local levies, foreign troops from friendly lands, or certain units from unique faction mechanics. Another very cool way of using the mercenary pool system in the mod. Will there be horde factions? No, they don't work well. Like I said before, I think this is an answer by Victimized Victimized, Dunedain might be a Horde faction, but, you know, according to Victimized, there won't be any. So we'll see. I think that's kind of an open question at the moment. Would you like to include Grima as a spy for Isengard? Possibly. Dude, I'd love to see Grima as a character. I think that has to happen. So I'm very excited to see if they do that. As a spy, it would fit in really well as well. By magic, does that include the possibility of, like, say, ranged staff attacks for Gandalf Saruman, kind of like the one in Warhammer 3, which adds a visual spell missile attack to all spellcasters? So this is kind of going back to, you know, will these characters, Sauron, Saruman, Gandalf, will they have a kind of magic ability, right? The initial answer was no. They will have special abilities, but not magic. So 99%, we won't be able to add magic projectiles unless we do something more articulate. It's not planned at the moment, but maybe they can invent something in the future. So just keep that in mind as well. I don't think really magic is going to make its way into this mod in a battle kind of ability perspective. Is it not possible to bring things over from Warhammer? Modders are not allowed to use GW game assets outside of the Warhammer games. It's part of CA's license agreement with Games Workshop. So that's just kind of a hard stop basically on that. They'd have a lot of copyright issues if you tried that. How many settlements are there in the campaign map? Great question. 156 settlements, 216 regions. Currently, there's no settlements in Eriador, so we plan to work on the area post version 1 release in order to deliver the campaign as early as possible. So lots of areas still need to be filled out. So it's going to be closer probably to like 200 regions in the full final release of the campaign. Any special mechanics for Rohan? Yes, but subject to change. We'll let you know when everything's ready. How will recruitment times work? Will Mordor be able to spam armies of low-tier units, whereas Lothlorien takes much longer to create a one army? And will the army limit from Attila be adjusted for each faction? Great. Very cool question here. At the moment, we are testing with longer recruitment time purely based on unit tiers, so not based on faction or race. But yes, regardless of the recruitment time of single units, Mordor and evil factions will be able to mass produce units much faster than other factions like the elves, which makes a lot of sense, right? Will the campaign be locked to good versus evil factions? So going back to the whole sandbox versus linear gameplay question as well. And if so, is there an option to play without those restrictions? There will not be any kind of hard restrictions. The campaign already plays out in a lore plausible way. However, it is very easy to go rogue on your allies and make various agreements with your enemies by lore. So it's a lore plausible, but no hard restrictions. It's a linear campaign, but you can sort of go out of it if you want as well. So it's kind of a mesh of sandbox and linear, just kind of as well. So will the campaign follow scripted events? There will be story elements for all factions similar to vanilla. Events won't force you down a specific path, but they may encourage you to play historically or kind of lorefully. For example, Haradrim will see its early game events focus on the unification of the whole Harad region. Does Aragorn have the option to reclaim the throne? Yes, so we plan on making an event chain where the player can reinstate Aragorn as king. There is a finished prototype, but we're not satisfied with it, so a rework is planned, hopefully for version 1, but I'm sure, you know, obviously lots of reworks will happen all over the place with future updates as well. But it's quite cool that this is going to be included. I quite like that. Since you're in the balancing phase of the campaign development, what are your biggest challenges with it? AI behavior, overpowered or underpowered mechanics, etc. So Victimized answered this with a really detailed balancing goals answer. What they're doing at the moment with balancing is identifying and eliminating OP exploits, defining baseline difficulty for every playable faction, match the actual challenge to the declared difficulty for start positions and mid-game. Early game should play close to designed scenario. There's a bit of a link there, but I don't see it. Make sure the AI cheating is not obvious and feel like a plausible playthrough. Again, kind of AI priorities, smarter, not stronger. Avoid LUA scripting workarounds for AI to work as intended. So balancing. Make sure battle balancing holds up in campaign. Fair auto-resolve, fair and balanced AI unit recruitment that are kind of realistic as well, I guess. Economic balance, income versus spending. Define and adhere to pacing balance per faction. So building, construction, technology, research, and recruitment. So that's kind of the balancing goals at the moment for how things are going. And it makes total sense, how the AI is actually engaging with various mechanics, how the kind of start to mid to late game progresses for each individual faction, but trying to get to a certain point, right? Trying to make sure this faction survives, maybe this faction wants to get destroyed, and just making sure it's a plausible playthrough, essentially. Will the ring be destroyable? If so, what happens to Mordor when it gets destroyed? So currently, they don't have any plans for the destruction of the ring. It's a tricky mechanic to design since it goes against the fundamental concepts of a Total War campaign. So this is going to be very interesting to see how the ring is implemented. I'm guessing it's going to be part of an event chain, basically a linear story event chain where, you get a mission kind of update. It's an event, a lovely kind of image, some explanation. You've got to send this unit to this region. It gets there. Maybe there's a quick battle that kind of ensues, and that leads to the ring moving to a different area where another event chain fires. And, I think that's how it's really going to be implemented. It's not something physical that you're going to be able to engage with, essentially. Is there any implementation of the elves gradually leaving Middle-earth for Valinor in the campaign? Another really cool question. It will be represented by them having less recruitment capabilities and more passive behaviors. Unfortunately, Attila does not have a proper population mechanic, but growth mechanic will definitely be slower for elves. So nice little kind of making it quite representative for elves in the campaign. I really like that. Will corrupted areas like Dol Guldur become greener and less evil looking once taken by a good faction? Most likely not. This isn't something that Attila supports. I think this is very close to how the Warhammer games function from a visual kind of change on the campaign. It's just not something that was done really for earlier Total War games. I mean, there is the escalation mechanic. You've got kind of the raising of cities affecting the rest of the region kind of style of issues in Attila as well. There's a winter kind of seasonal change that affects the entire map. For these games, but it's not something that can be localized as much as what this person is asking for, I think. What year does the campaign start in? Also, what year was the ring first destroyed, for reference? So 3015 TA, ring was destroyed in 3019. I don't actually know. Oh, it's 12 turns per year. Here it goes. So it's going to be like between when you start the campaign, 4 years, 48 turns essentially between the start of the campaign and when the ring is destroyed. But this is subject to change as well, just FYI. Will there be region restriction to recruitment replenishment of certain units? If yes, will regionally restricted units of one faction be available as mercenaries to other factions after conquering the region? So yes, I think we've had this kind of question before. Yes, some units will be tied to specific settlements. We're currently working on introducing unit caps on such special units as well. So that's something they didn't mention before. I was kind of wondering about this as well. I think more elite and higher tier units, especially units that you get access to through settlements, like he's saying here, will have unit caps. So you'll only be able to recruit 1, 2, 3, 4 of them, at a certain time. Will every faction have its own unique UI? Yes, absolutely, if possible. What about faction tree mechanics like marriage, adoption, making children? So if you didn't know this already, family tree will be replaced with a chain of command mechanic. And this affects every faction, which will include only commanders and politicians, no wives or children. It's done this way so that the mechanic can accommodate all kinds of factions, human, elves, or orcish. Have you made any changes to how army attrition works? Will, for example, a Gondor army entering Mordor's lands take some unique type of attrition? Yes, this has been implemented already. Mordor volcanic area has wasteland attrition that only orcs are immune to. There's other custom attritions, dead marshes, which applies to everyone, paths of the dead, etc., all based on faction culture as well, guys, by the way. So different faction cultures will be affected by different kinds of attrition, which is very cool. Will there be a form of a supply system for armies? No, there won't be a supply system in Dawnless Days, guys. Maybe someone will develop a sub-mod, but at the moment, officially, the answer to that is no. How will diplomacy work? Are there any kind of like better standings with good factions if you're on their side? Can you not bargain with factions on the bad side? You can bargain with any faction. There's no hard stop either, but it's just going to be way harder if you're trying to bargain with a faction that is a natural kind of lore-friendly enemy, essentially. How long will a full campaign last? This is a great question as well. On average, we are still working on defining exactly all the details about campaign length. However, they have identified the following time frame. So early game is going to be up to 30 turns, up to 60 60 turns after that, it's going to be mid-game, and then after turn 60, late game starts, where there's going to be some results of the kind of AI priorities leading into later theaters of warfare, and certain events will maybe fire as well later game to just keep things interesting. So more on that in a bit as well. How will the balance of power in your faction work? Can there be a civil war? That mechanic is disabled in version 1. There won't be a balance of power, a civil war. Originally, what they wanted is to repurpose it to unique faction mechanics. However, the feature was underwhelming and impossible to reuse for complex systems, so we're keeping it for future in case we can find a specific use for it. Can you tell us anything about victory conditions or chapter missions? Really good question here. We have removed chapter objectives after a thorough discussion. They've been replaced with events that follow what you actually do in the campaign, as opposed to setting arbitrary goals that don't reflect the current in-game campaign state. Victory conditions will come in a few different forms. Short and long victory earn a specified amount of victory points, essentially, kind of similar to how Pharaoh does things, and a more classical Total War style of victory conquer vast territories and certain factions to be destroyed, etc. Will Palantirs give you some faction bonuses? At the moment, Palantiri don't exist in the mod. They might do in the future, though, as a kind of item or maybe a trait that you pick up as a general. We'll see about that in the future, maybe. Will the map just be white like the maps you see online, or are you adding greenery everywhere like in Lothlorien? During the polishing stage, they will embellish the campaign map. So that's quite an interesting comment. At the moment, you know, the campaign is there, everything's been implemented mechanically, etc. But I've never seen this before. They're going to be adding more in the polishing stage to the campaign map, assets, you know, forests and things like that. So that's quite cool, interesting to know as well. Will there be wonders on the map? Yes, possibly. Will there be a population system? A population system is something we've considered but decided against implementing for now, focusing on more fundamental designs. They might return to it in future, or somebody might make a submod adding a population system as well. What plans do you guys have to keep the end game interest in late stages of the campaign? So it says image here, but what I'm going to show you is this. The answer to this was a modder, essentially, you know, how do I answer this in a sneaky and yet it is to the point kind of way? So he shared this image here, which is very kind of it does say a lot about what might happen in the late game, right? So there's likely going to be a late game invasion of some form from somewhere, some major faction, and you're just going to have to deal with it essentially to keep things interesting, which I quite like. I do like that the Dawnless Days team are doing this, thinking about what is going to happen in the late game. Will there be any Thermopylae style mountain passes? So we've got Minas Morgul, the Black Gate, Moria, Path of the Dead. These will all be kind of Thermopylae style, narrow battle maps where it's very choke pointy, right? It's going to be very interesting. How many factions will there be in total? So for playable in version 1, there will be 9. In total, there will be 35. So that includes unplayable as well. It excludes rebels and emerging factions. So very cool little tidbit here. But of course, keep in mind, in future updates after the first version of public release, there will be 1 or 2 new playable factions added in for each kind of update, hopefully, and more unplayable factions kind of dotted around, filling the rest of the campaign map as well. And then finally, guys, the last question here. Can you give me the best and most thorough answer ever on what's the status of audio voiceover for units and campaign music? So we should be able to support custom campaign voiceovers for each of the currently planned in-game cultures: Gondor, Dwarves, Easterlings, Elves, Isengard, Middlemen, Orc, Rohan, and Southrons. Due to Attila limitations, we can support up to 2 voice actors for each of these cultures. But those voice actors are randomly assigned by the game to general, so unfortunately, we can't give custom characters their own specific voiceovers. Interesting. The first iteration of campaign voiceovers will be Battle for Middle-earth voice lines moving over, and the implementation on this is already underway. We've seen that in previous videos as well. For future iterations, we may find voice actors to create voice lines for us, but this is unconfirmed. I'd love for that to happen. Custom voice lines, I think, would really add to a lot of the immersion that Dawnless Days already has. So it's just going to be the cherry on top for me. And then finally, guys, there were a few sneak peek images, screenshots that were shared of the state of the campaign, some things that are being worked on. So this screenshot was shared, I believe, by Victimized in response to a balancing question. How is balancing looking right now? You know, are you still working on this, that, and the other? And this shows a 50 turns in campaign about how things are looking. It's AI only, and you can see, you know, a lot of the evil factions have taken over. Harad in the south, Rune moving further west. Mordor has almost completely destroyed Gondor, as well as Isengard and a few others destroying Rohan. So good has basically failed in this campaign, but it's quite cool to see how balancing looks so far. Lots of work to be done, of course, a bit more balancing. The next screenshot is this one. This, I think, is just kind of showcasing a bit more of the Harad starting positions in the south. You've got a lot of the kind of campaign textures and how things are looking, kind of assets-wise, rivers, lakes, etc. And the UI as well. There's a really nice kind of, you can see a bit of the UI and how that looks uniquely to Harad, which is quite cool. The next one is it's just showing the Haradrim faction leader kind of model, which looks really, really crisp. I'm loving that. And then we've got a few screenshots here going to kind of building trees, control, which is essentially the public order equivalent in Dawnless days, and how that works. More building trees. Victimized shared a kind of a sneak peek in how unique faction mechanics will work for Mordor. So you've got the Rings of Power here, ability to use Rings of Power as a tool to achieve various political goals, search for the One Ring, so you'll be able to utilize Nazgul characters to find the ring. Finding the One Ring provides powerful faction-wide bonuses, gives access to the iconic character Sauron, Nazgul as special powerful characters that can be obtained in the course of a campaign. So you're not just going to start with all the Nazgul, right? They'll be available as you go through it. Mordor's Call, an ability to temporarily unlock Easterling and Southron mercenaries in recruitment, which is quite cool. And Dol Guldur Autonomy, so giving players the dilemma. Do you want to control Dol Guldur yourself, or do you want to wish them to be basically kind of a protectorate maybe, or an ally, or something just autonomous essentially, which is quite cool as well. If players decide to control DG themselves, all DG territories will be given to Mordor. Otherwise, nothing will change. So quite a cool set of kind of unique mechanics here from Mordor. And then another kind of image here just showing essentially how the various kind of unique assets look for generals, the unicards, the UI for Harad. It's just really, really well done. And then very, very finally, we've got a kind of a difficulty a kind of modifier setting here. So you can see easy, normal, hard, very hard, how these all will kind of look like, how they're explained, and legendary, of course, as well. And that's going to be it for today, guys. I wanted to cover the Q&A on the Dawnless Days Discord. Some really interesting questions and answers here. You know, we know there are going to be wonders on the map, that there's going to be more work done on the campaign map visually in the polishing stage. You know, we know all about how victory conditions are going to work, how the average length of a campaign is, how certain factions are going to get scripted events, and, you know, the start dates, and certain units that are going to be available through kind of conquering a region. You know, there's lots of really, really great questions here that I implore you to go and check out for yourself in the Discord. This channel is still here to kind of sift through and see any kind of more interesting questions that I didn't cover here maybe in this video, but there are some great questions and answers here. This was a fantastic Q&A, and they've said they will be doing future Q&As just like this. So hopefully more in the future just like this. If you have any more questions, you couldn't get involved, you missed it, there will be more of this. So jump into the mods Discord server. I've dropped a link in the video description below. And yeah, essentially that's going to be it for today, guys. Thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. You found it informative. If you did, give it a like and drop any thoughts or questions in the comment section below. I will answer each and every one of them. I'm sure the modders will come in and answer some of them as well. And subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this, more news and Q&A and update videos about Dawnless Days and other mods in Total War. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.